Well, welcome back to the Growing Money with Sean Trace podcast, and I've got an awesome guest with me who's actually coming on. This is a little different. We're gonna be doing something more regular here, and this awesome man, who I'll let introduce himself, is gonna be here doing it with me. Who are you, brother?
So I am Professor Heath. I go by Professor Heath here on campus, but I'm Steve Heath, been teaching accounting at College of San Mateo for about 10 years. I've got a huge backstory that I do want to share, but
Let's do it.
I don't want to dive totally into it just at the moment. I want to give you space to kind of.
Yeah, we're gonna get there, man. We got time. We've got time to talk tonight, and this is kind of like when I bring people on the podcast, we generally talk about like their background and story and topics, but like we don't get to really dive into things. And after our conversation, we were both sitting there thinking, you know what, we'd love to like talk more about specific things, and that was kind of like we came up with this concept of this money school idea. We started off this idea of money school, and my daughter just walked into the room. For people who, I'm going to be editing some of that out, but my daughter walked in the room, and that was kind of part of the motivation for me of starting this whole podcast, and why I wanted to start, with working with you on money school, is to kind of share with people financial information they don't have. So talk to me. You're a professor. Like, talk to me about your experience and your background, money views, and all that good stuff, man.
Yeah. So if we do have time, like I sort of feel like I would I would like to start this journey off kind of the same way that I started off in my class, like on the first day of school.
Let's do
Um,
it.
and I may get halfway through this and you're gonna be like, what the hell was I thinking? But I tell my students, and I'm gonna tell you and your listeners right now that I'm literally the dumbest person that's ever gonna try to give you advice on accounting or finance or money. Like I'm honestly the dumbest person that's ever gonna give that advice. But because of that, like you really need to listen to everything I have to say, right? And in class, a lot of students they'll like think, okay, like where's this guy coming from? And I I I share my story, and I'm going to share it with you right now, um, because I think it just like it paints a nice picture that you don't really have to be a superstar at certain things to become very successful. You could be very average, and you could do very average things. But if you just do average things the right way, you can do really well for yourself. And so, on the topic of like feeling like I'm the dumbest person to ever give advice, I failed the third grade. Like I have learning disabilities, and school was just it was never my thing. I don't have the ability to sit and sit still, and so like school's just not for me. I failed the third grade. I was a huge problem child through middle school, and by the time I got to high school, the wheels were basically falling off the track. So my freshman year, I got arrested a few times for dealing drugs in the men's bathroom at school, and got kicked out of the school I was going to my freshman year. My sophomore year, uh, I just stopped going to school altogether. Got arrested again, got in trouble. They wanted to send me to a continuation school, and I was just like, look, that's just not for me, right? So at 16, I left high school. And
Wow.
my parents were like, "Yeah, you're not going to be living under our house if you're not going to school." And I was like, "Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I'm moving out too." So I moved out with a couple of guys that I dropped out of high school with at 16, and we moved into a
Wow.
really bad neighborhood. And there was like probably four of us living in an apartment. And you don't live with a bunch of high school dropouts without getting into a lot of trouble. And
Yeah.
so one of my roommates started dealing drugs. And yeah, so just full disclosure, I started um, participating in that activity. And at 18, I got arrested for like the fourth or fifth time. I got arrested for under the influence, intent to sell, and possession of methamphetamines.
Wow.
So went to jail, spent a few nights in jail. and to sort of make a long story short, I the charges were dismissed. It was like dismissed on a technicality. But like if you were to have a conversation, an honest conversation with anybody, I was totally guilty. Like I was a drug
Yeah.
addict. Um, I was just heading in a totally wrong direction. But that experience of being arrested, it sort of woke me up and got me kind of thinking in the right direction. So for about 4 years after that, I sobered up, I cleaned up, but I still kind of bounced around. And when I was 22, I started working for a landscaper, and the landscaper was like, "Hey, listen, you should probably take a horticulture class at the local community college so that you can learn something about plants and botany, and you can start managing or running some of the crews." He's like, "I think that would be really good for you." And I was like, "Man, like the whole school thing is not for me, right?" So like I had a
Yeah.
terrible experience in school growing up, and I can't do it. I didn't even graduate from high school, and so I don't even think I can go to a community college. And he was like, "Well, just go to the local school, try to get into that class, and let's just see what happens." So begrudgingly, I went to the school he recommended, and I was so intimidated by the process, like I couldn't get out of my car. I just like drove the loop of the campus and went back to work a few days later and was just like, "Yeah, class has already started. Like, unfortunately, I can't take that class." And so he's like, "Okay, well, go to a." He sent me to another school a little bit further away, and I was like, "Man, this guy is just relentless." So I drove to the
Yeah.
second community college in our neighborhood, and I at least got the courage to get out of the car. So I parked and I started walking the campus. And I was like, "Man, this is honestly not for me." I was totally intimidated by the students. Everybody
Yeah.
looked like they had somewhere to go, somewhere to be, and I was a fish out of water. I just did not feel comfortable. Didn't even know really where to go. So I left and went back and gave the same excuse. And he pushed me to go to a third community college. He's like,
Wow.
"Listen, you grew up in San Jose, like, just go to San Jose City College and go to the fucking admissions office, right? Like, it's not that difficult, Steve." So I meandered into the admissions office at San Jose City College at the age of 22 and told them, I want to take a horticulture class, and I didn't know what the process was. So again, to cut the story short, they had me take a placement test because I didn't graduate from college. So I took this placement test, and like the craziest thing happened. Like I totally failed it.
Really?
Yeah, no, I just like bombed it completely. And so the lady was like, "Okay, listen, you can't jump into that horticulture class. You're not a strong enough student to survive that experience. So you should take like a beginner English class and a rudimentary math class." So like they wanted me to take a night class on Tuesday nights where I was like learning how to add and subtract fractions, and then
Wow.
an English class on Thursday nights where I was literally like starting a topic sentence and then supporting it with like three or four supporting sentences so I could learn how to write paragraphs. And so I registered for the classes. And literally for the first 2 3 weeks, like I found myself in these classes, like literally learning how to add and subtract fractions. And and in fact, just a quick sidestep, the classes were so low that they don't even offer them in a community college system in California anyway, because studies have shown that if kids start off in those classes, they never make it through the process. And so they don't even offer those classes anymore. That's where I started my journey. And so
Wow.
about halfway through my first semester, I was like, "Man, this is the biggest fucking mistake I think I've ever made," right? Like, I thought I was doing myself a disservice by dropping out of high school, but man, like, I am I am working a landscaping job that I hate.
Yeah.
I hate mowing lawns. And then on Tuesdays and Thursday nights, I'm like going to school to like become become a landscaper. Like this is crazy. Like this is not I don't this just is this isn't for me, right?
Yeah.
But there was something about my math class that I actually liked. And so
Mm,
I was like, boy, um, maybe I'll take an accounting class, right? Maybe I'll take, like, I like the math and I love money and I don't have any. So maybe I'll take an accounting class. So and cut me off if I'm going too long, but
yeah.
I really feel like it's part of my experience and it sort of uh, explains why I do what I do. So anyway, I tried taking an accounting class my second semester, and they wouldn't let me take the class because I wasn't proficient enough in math, right? So I had to take beginner's algebra. So my second semester at night, still working in construction, I took my algebra class and I did pretty well. I was like, yeah, I started at the bottom. And so I was like learning all the fundamentals. And so my third semester, right, I sat in my first accounting class, and it was like basically a class very similar to the topics that I think we're going to be talking about for quite a while, hopefully moving forward.
Yeah.
And like I'm even getting chills right now telling you this, like, but sitting in that class like changed my entire life. Like the direction that I was heading um, was I had no direction. And my experience in this class was like so profound. Um, halfway through the semester, we don't really need to get into the topics, but like halfway through the semester, the professor, as we were walking out of the classroom, was just like, "Hey, why are you taking the class? Like, why are you taking this class?" And man, I had no real good explanation for it. I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm taking classes at night. I have a lot of friends that are taking community college classes and, just sort of trying to figure it all out. But really, I have no real idea or plan. And he was like, boy, you should major in accounting and you should go to the University of California, Berkeley. I was just like, dude, you're fucking crazy, right? Like I didn't graduate from high school. Like this is only my like third class that I've taken here at San Jose City College, and like Cal is where all the smart people go. Like that's crazy. And he was like, no, he's like, it's not that crazy. He's like, just go to the campus, go to the admissions office and talk to somebody about like what classes you would have to take at City College to transfer to Cal. It was literally the same conversation I was having with my boss a year before, but now
Wow.
it was with somebody else who was just kind of pushing me way out of my comfort zone. Right. So a few, little shortly after that conversation, I was hanging out with a bunch of buddies and we were having fun. And I was like, yeah, my accounting teacher thinks I should go to Cal. He's like, well, I should go major in accounting and go to Berkeley. And like all of my buddies started laughing at me. And I was like,
Wow.
man, what's up with that? Like, had the same conversation with my dad. And my dad was even like, dude, come on, man. That's like kind of crazy, right? And so there was just something about the reaction from people that inspired me to like go to Cal and go to the admission. I was like, fuck these people. Like, my
Right?
accounting teacher was telling me that I should do this. And so I drove to Cal. It's just like, I live in the Bay Area. So it wasn't that difficult. So I went to Cal. I went into the admissions office and I spoke to somebody and they gave me this really long list of classes. And they were like, you take these classes and you do really well in them. We will consider you for junior transfer. Like you can come in as a junior transfer. So for the next 3 years, like that's all I did. I
Wow.
literally like banged out every single class on that list. I went through like algebra, trigonometry, geometry, calculus. I became like an expert at being a really good student. Like in the beginning, I had no understanding of what it meant to succeed in a classroom, other than there wasn't anybody who was going to tell me anything that I wasn't going to be successful in that class and on my journey. And
Yeah.
like the more classes, the more semesters that went by, the better I got. And so I finally applied to go to Cal. I took a semester off and was in Australia hanging out with some friends. And my dad called me and he said, "Dude, I've got this letter from the University of California, Berkeley. I think it's the news." He's like, "Should I open it up?" I was like, "Yeah, go for it." So his exact response was, "Holy shit, Steve, you did it."
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, so I went to Cal, like, and I did terrible, right? So like it really was the place where all the smart kids went, and it was me. I struggled for 2 years. It was a total culture shock. The classes were way harder. The students were much, much, much stronger. And so I struggled a lot. And towards the end, when it came time to graduate, um, we would all go interview, like me and all the other kids that I was graduating with. And it turned out that like I was the one who was getting some of the better job offers. And we would go back and we would all compare notes, and everybody's like, "How is it that like Steve is getting all the really good job offers when he's like he's, you know, half the student the rest of us are, like we're all the bright kids and it's Steve, you know, like what's going on?" And like I've had a lot of time to think about what was going on. And in my opinion, like you don't get to where I got, you don't get to the finish line. You don't reach that point where you're like like the first thing that I was ever going to graduate from was Cal. I didn't graduate from high school. I didn't graduate from community college. Like literally the first graduation stage I was ever going to walk across was like at one of the most prestigious universities in the country.
Yeah.
And you don't get to that point without demonstrating, like, all of the qualities that employers are really looking for, right?
Yeah.
So, like, determination, self-starter, accountability, right? Critical thinking, and I can go through the rest, but, like, I was able to articulate stories that a lot of kids that just sort of had everything handed to them weren't able to communicate, and that resonated in my interviews.
Yeah.
Um, and so I ended up getting a really good job. I started working for a really prominent, like the most prominent accounting firm in the country that now no longer exists due to the Enron scandal. But so I worked there for a little while. I worked in their tax department. I did a lot of international tax work, and it turned out it wasn't for me. You
Yeah.
know, I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about what my career would look like. So I left one firm and I went to go work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I started valuing hotels in the context of litigation. And I really liked that. That was like, I really started liking that work. However, I didn't really have a background in hotel management, right? I liked traveling, but it's different than, you know, giving advice about how to run your hotel. And so I was like, wow, I really like the litigation work, but I need to like focus the litigation work on things that I'm like strong at, and accounting and finance was that skill. So when I was about 3 to 4 years into my career, I started working in like a real small sliver of the accounting profession, which is litigation consulting. And I valued intellectual property in the context of commercial litigation. And that's kind of like what we were talking about in our previous conversation. But in that, I did so many cool things. Like I worked again, like I was saying, I valued Snoop Dogg's artwork on his first album cover. I worked on cases against Pitbull. I represented the reggae band Revolution. We sued all sorts of cell phone manufacturers. I worked on like the biggest case in Oregon state history. It's like $1 billion award. Um, I I partnered up with a like an amazing expert, and he and I did a bunch of international work, and so I found myself working in, in Europe quite a bit. And it was about 10 years ago where I was making $450 an hour. I was charging clients $450 an hour. I had like bought a house. I had saved everything I needed to save for retirement. I was making a ton of money. Um, was was very successful in my career. Had enough money set aside for my kids' college education. Um, and I felt like I just wanted to do something a little bit more meaningful, like as ridiculous as that sounds, right? I loved what I was doing, but it was really stressful. And I needed to find like a little bit more balance. And I'm going to go back to kind of where this started, which is that class that I sat in, right? That first accounting class that I sat in was the most um, transformative experience I've ever had in my entire life.
That's awesome.
And so I was like, well, man, I would love to, I'm not going to be facetious, but like, man, I would really like to give back to the community that was like so profound to me. And so I reached out to the College of San Mateo about 10 years ago and was like, man, like I would love to teach a class. Started teaching very shortly after that. And then after my first semester, I was like, man, this is what I was supposed to be doing. Not a lot of
Yeah.
people will say they were born to be a community college accounting instructor, but man, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And so I retired from consulting and dove into this full time. And I've been teaching, absolutely love it. Um, and in the process, maybe just the last bit that I want to share with you, in the process of teaching, I wrote a personal finance textbook for community college students, right? So all the concepts that you pull from textbooks and personal finance books that are directed at individuals with, some established base, right? So I've taken all of those concepts and I've sort of directed or reshaped them in the context of somebody who's literally just getting started, right? So maybe they're a little bit through the college experience, or maybe they're just starting it, or maybe they're actually a few years just out of college, but like the textbook is written for young individuals who really have no understanding of personal finance and the power and ease of what it is. And so I wrote that textbook, um, and I'm very, very passionate about it. I give it away for free. I have people all the time telling me I should sell it. I should charge money because it would demonstrate that I understand my value. And it's like, I don't need anybody to tell me like how valuable this information is. And I don't need to charge for it to like convince people how valuable it is. Like, I don't feel right about charging for the book. I don't want to profit off of my students. And so I give the book away for free, right?
That's
I
awesome.
self published it. I spent thousands to have it professionally edited. It's like a very high quality book, and I'm super proud of it, and it's free for everybody. And so like
That's awesome.
this our experience, hopefully over the next year, Sean, is what the next chapter for me anyway, I think is that I've often found that like as awesome as my book is, people a lot of students just aren't going to open it up and start reading it. And so like I want to pull some of the more pertinent points from the book and then just like fold it into a conversation and tell stories around it and try to like bring, as ridiculous as it may sound, but like bring the concepts to life
I
through
love it.
you and I in our conversation. So that's sort of my story, why I'm sitting in this chair sharing with you, you know. the experience.
But I appreciate you sharing that, and I appreciate we had the time to talk about that because and then one of the things I'm I'm going to turn it right back around and share it with you and talk a little bit about my story because I never share my story even though it's my podcast. It's kind of wild. Like I always am listening to other people's stories and like I'll occasionally drop pieces here and there about why I'm doing this, but there's a big reason. It's interesting that we're kind of like opposites in ways. In school, I was the bright kid. Like I was the kid who was always like this kid, he's going places, he's achieving things, and it's like, what does that even mean? You get a 6-year-old kid and they're like, oh yeah, this kid, he's going places. What is how can you project that? You know what I mean? And as I got older, I loved learning. I still love learning. I still love school. I love taking classes. If I could be a forever student and just forever study, I would do it. I love it. But as I got into university, I I was my parents were both educators. They worked at the university I was at, and I got in there and I was like, I changed my major 5 times. And I liked this, I liked that, and I wanted to study this. And luckily at that time, my parents were working there, so I didn't have to take out student loans. So it was just an absolute blessing, and I had no idea how much of a blessing that was. I found out later. But as I'm in school, I'm in there and, I'm kind of doing this and that. And then I kind of was like, I never had that pressure. And at first I was, studying medicine. Then I dropped out of pre-med and I settled on history. And, it's like, history is fun. I think history is awesome. But at the same time, there was no job prospects. I graduated and I wanted to study Eastern philosophy and Taoism and walk the earth and learn about, all of these interesting Eastern philosophies. And so I moved to Asia and I did what other people were doing at that time. And it was a good market, was teaching English in Asia, and at that point in time, you could make pretty good money doing it. And what was supposed to be a side gig kind of stuck with me for a while, and I kept teaching. And then I moved back to the States for a while and studied, a master's degree that, though was interesting, I had friends that were finishing. I studied Chinese medicine and acupuncture, which is really interesting. But I have all these friends who have graduated and now are not practicing because there's not much of a market for it. You know, it might be a great thing. You might be able to help people. And in Asia, they do it for all types of things. But in the US, unless you're setting up a fertility clinic or you're treating people for pain, that's about it. That's about the length of what you can do. And you're competing with massage therapists, and it costs a lot more than a massage therapy degree,
Yeah.
and so it's like, it's wild like that. And then I moved, I saw the writing on the wall and I took out a lot of student loans. I am massively in student loan debt still. And, and then I moved back to Asia and I met my wife and I got into film and media. And the thing was, though, is like, while I've been working in film and media, um, I'm getting to my point, but I was like, at this place, everyone looked at me like, Sean, he is going to be the guy that is successful. He is going to be the guy that gets ahead. And then I found myself just as this English teacher in Asia. I kept trying to tell people I'm in media. I kept telling people I work in media. I do this and that. And everyone was like, sure, sure, sure. And I just kept teaching. And the thing is like, lately, the market has gotten worse and worse and worse. Like, it used to be that you would make, what was it, like in Asia, it's not very good, but 2,000 a month. But that goes a lot further here. And now it's down to
Yeah.
like 1,200 because of inflation. And I'm sitting there going, here, I'm a long way out of my degree. I'm sitting here at 45. And even right now, I'm going to tell you something I haven't told anyone else, because I've been trying to build my media company. I've been trying to get into podcasting, and I have a full production team that works for my wife that does videos that I build out for my daughter. I have Ilani's Little World, and I believe in these things. I love them, but I'm making no money. And here I am, and I've applied for the last 2 years. I have applied to 2,000 jobs, 2,000 jobs for podcast producers, for media professionals, and I get to a second interview at best. And then I had this one role last week that it was like this awesome role for a top podcaster. And I was just like, that's great. I would crush it. Then I got, it was like about a month ago. And then I got this message, like, you know what? We're not hiring for that role anymore. We decided we didn't need it, and it's just like, and I'm sitting here at the point like tomorrow in about 6 hours from now, I have an interview for a waiter position back in my hometown in Napa because it pays in that area. Waiters get paid a lot of money. And,
Yeah.
Here I am sitting here 45. And this is why I started this podcast, because I don't have it figured out. And I'm sitting here and I had all this potential, and I'm sitting there looking there, and like I see online, and I go through with Chat GPT about how I can build out my media company, how I can build out all this. And certainly I can. And I'm going to, even if I take that, like if I get that high paying waiter gig, like I will be funneling all that money straight into my company. Like, because I believe in this podcast. I believe in the other podcast I'm doing. And I know that there's a market for selling these to people, but I don't have the time to edit everything, and I have an editor that I have to have, but like off of a teacher salary of $1,200 a month, that doesn't go anywhere, man. And so my point being, I started this whole thing because I wanted to talk to other people, and I do not want my daughter to go through the same crap that I did, because I love my parents. I love what I grew up with, but I grew up with, my parents are a Christian denomination that is a little bit more conservative, and great people. The education I came up with, they're like my parents are Seventh-day Adventist, and they have this great health message. Absolutely amazing university down in Los Angeles area called Loma Linda that does a great medical program, one of the blue zones of the world, because they're all vegetarian and they eat well. But they have this aversion. My father has this aversion towards money. I got into it with my dad today because he was talking about the end of the world and end times. And I'm like, Dad, I've got a 9-year-old daughter. I don't have time for that. I don't have
Yeah.
time to hear about like your belief that this world is ending and all that. And I'm not hating on that. But it was just like that mentality of always like, we don't need to prepare for the future because you know what? This world's going to be done someday. And right now, I love my dad, but he is struggling in retirement with not enough money and not a nice place to live.
Yeah.
And it is, and I see that, and I'm like, I don't want that. And it's like I talked to my wife, and my wife lives in Asia, and it's like, I was talking to her about, well, we need to start thinking about retirement and things like that, and setting aside and building a better future for ourselves. You know what retirement is here in Vietnam? It's making sure that your kids are successful. And like in the, and this is one of the challenges that I see with my wife, where her parents now are like, well, she's moderately successful. So they stopped everything. Everyone stopped working. And it's like,
Really?
and so I'm sitting here in the middle of this, trying to reorient my ship, in the ship that is my family. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting there like, and then last year I did my MBA and I got a great scholarship for it. And so I was like, and I came out and still can't get a job, man. And I was just like, I was like, oh, I'm sure that this MBA is going to open doorways for me. There was a whole bunch of other classmates that thought the same thing, man. But it's like, and I'm not hating on the school, not hating on the programs. I learned a lot. I love learning. But did it help me get it, it move forward the gauge in the career, and it's like, and this is the thing too. And I'm not hating on this restaurant work. Like, I think there's a lot of people, I've been reading about a lot of professionals that are that got laid off, and they were like trying for the last couple of years to find gigs in their chosen line of work now, especially in the tech industry. And these people are like, you know what? I'm going back and doing something else. I was reading last week this post on LinkedIn, and it was from a sound engineer who also works in media like I do. He worked on Hollywood movies. This guy's big. He is a big name. I can't remember his name, but he has a big name, And
Yeah.
like one of the things people were talking about was like, he posted, he's like, I just want to share with you guys some photos. This is me in my Trader Joe's uniform. This is where I'm at right now. He's like, right now, with the way the film industry is going, it's tough. And I'm working at Trader Joe's until my next big gig comes along. And the Trader Joe's team is awesome to me. And you know what? There's no shame to be had in providing for your family. There's no shame to be had in doing what you need to get by. But at the same time, I want to talk to other people. And this is where when we started talking about this, because I think that's my story to a degree. And I'm trying to right the ship. But one of the things that we want to talk about is why we're creating this money segment. And I want to share a little bit about my motivation. And then I would love to hear again where you're coming from as well. Because I think that we both see something that's missing. We have both taught as professors at a university. I taught communications at a university in the Napa Valley, and it's a great school. It's my alma mater where I went to school, and I love this school. Last year, I was teaching, and I had some guys in my class, and they were calling in like, I hate teaching online. I love in person. In person, I'm there and I am rapid fire. I'm working with people. But when I was teaching online and I had these three guys that were calling in from basketball practice. And I said, hey, I said, are you literally dribbling a basketball right now? No, 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 professor. I'm not. I'm like, I can see the basketball. Your camera's on, man.
That's the
And I was talking to my supervisor, like the head of the department. I was like, why are we allowing kids? And she's like, well, you know what? They're on the varsity team. So we need to kind of do what we got to do. And I said, hang on. So shouldn't the practice, she's like, that your class really is at the same time as practice. And I said, shouldn't they be focusing on learning? Because I mean, these guys, and I mean, I love the students at my school. These guys are not going
yeah,
to be NBA players, man. They are
yeah,
literally no one from this school is ending up in the NBA.
yeah,
And I am doubtful that any of these guys are going to end up in any serious coaching positions that are like legit.
yeah,
And that's not a judgment on any of them. It's just maybe we should be focusing on something that's going to give them some longevity. And if they want to do the coaching thing, do the coaching thing. Like really get into a great apprenticeship. Go and find a program that that's going to develop you into something. Because right now you're half in, you're half out. My class cost a lot of money. It was a private school, man. My class was about $3,000, I think, per student for this course, man. And I
yeah,
felt like it was criminal how much they were paying, and they weren't required to show up. I didn't want to fail anyone. So I was like, I dragged these guys across the finish line. I literally was like, you are not failing my class, because that's a
yeah,
reflection on me right now. A little bit of my ego
yeah,
got in there. And I was like, but we're going to get you to the finish line, man. I'm not here to fail you for $3,000. I don't do that. And like, I had one student that was just like, he's like, I failed this comm class 3 times. I'm like, how can you fail a communications class 3 times, man?
yeah,
It's a communications class. This is comm 101, man. And like
yeah,
this guy was like, and he just didn't show up. And I said, right now there's a fundamental problem in education, and we're talking, and both of us were talking about, we want to focus this on Gen Z, and with my daughter's case, Gen Alpha, creating content that's geared toward people that are at this great point of their lives. Like most of this stuff is geared, most of the personal finance stuff out there is geared toward, and this is why I have a hard time watching it. It's geared toward adults with full-time jobs that have everything figured out. Like, all right, guys, I'm going to tell you about what your next investment should be. And I'm like, fuck, how can I make more money so I can make investments, man? I'm
yeah,
making $1,200 a month right now. Like, it's embarrassing to say out loud, but that's what I've been surviving off of, man, for the past 10 years teaching, and it's like, it's brutal. It's brutal. And I have this mountain of student loan debt, but I've stayed here because my wife's career has been here, and I've supported her. But at some point in time, I got to make something shift, man. Otherwise, and I gotta share this. Hang on one second. Alani, I need you not in the room for this next part. I need you to go upstairs right now. I can't have you hearing this part.
okay, man, bare your soul.
Fuck. Last year, when I was dealing with some serious financial challenges, I thought multiple times about whether my family would be better off without me. And it was a dark fucking night, man. really dark time. And I sat there and I thought, would they be better off? And I went through this checklist, like of what it would be like for them if I wasn't around, what it would be like with them if I was. And I was sitting there, like, my wife could remarry someone who's probably financially better off than I am. And I said, but you know what? I just kept coming back to it, but I can't guarantee that my daughter's going to be okay. I can't guarantee that. And I said, well, what the fuck else can do? And I started this podcast because I said, you know what? If I can't figure it out by talking to these experts, then what the hell else am I supposed to do?
Wow.
And when you came on the podcast, man,
Dude,
I was
that's
like,
giving me chills, man.
this is someone I can talk to. That's it. That's why I started this. I've never said that on here.
No shit.
I'd love to hear why you want to do this shit, man. Talk to me.
Well, so a couple of things before I go into my side. Um, yeah, that I wish I could solve your problems
It's
with
all good, man.
in the context of our conversations. Um, and that's just that's just my reaction from listening to your story. Um, and then I'll just say that, man, that's a pretty powerful. Uh, like, you sharing your story is like there's real depth in what you just shared, and it takes a lot of courage. And I was going to tell you before you launched into that like what I personally think is missing from a lot of the personal finance content are kind of like two things. One is a lot of humility and
Yeah.
authenticity, right? So like talking about money. So I heard somebody say that talking about money is more stressful, or it creates more shame than talking about your own sex life. Right. So people
Yeah.
are more comfortable talking about sex than they are about money. And so like for me in my classes, like I've always tried to like be as humble as I possibly can, and to like share all of my inefficiencies or deficiencies, because it's like you don't have to be a superstar to like do this part of your life right, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people have, I don't know what it is, but like a lot of the people who share this information online, they do it with a certain type of personality that just doesn't resonate with me. And so like leading up to today's conversation, I was like, man, fucking Sean's gonna be like, what was I thinking with this guy, right? But I honestly feel like I'm gonna be as much of me as I can be with you that I am with my students, because it resonates with my students, right? I
Yeah.
promise you, I'm the dumbest person that's ever going to give you any advice. And
Fucking doubt that, man.
for the
I've
last
met
two
some pretty
weeks,
fucking dumb people before.
no, I'm telling you, man,
No.
I've made so many bad decisions. It's not even funny. And like, it's just like, I'm like, we're going to be talking about things. You're going to be asking me questions, and I'm not going to have the answers for you because, unfortunately, like, I'm not an expert on all of it, but I do know what I know, and I'm super passionate about it. And I'm, I'm really, really looking forward to like bringing stuff to life in the most authentic way, and just hearing your side of the story. Um, yeah, I'm just really excited about what this could be.
I there's I always will joke with my students, like, whenever because I still teach and I love it. I fucking love teaching. I wish I could make a shit ton of money teaching. That's why I like this podcast and Ilani's little world, because I feel like if I keep them up, maybe I can. But the thing is, like, my students are like, every time we
Can
were
I
like,
stop you right there for just a second?
yeah,
So you can make a lot of money teaching, right? So
yeah,
when I started, so one of the things that I was like, I'm never going to teach because you just don't make any money. But like, I am making so much money right now teaching. It's
see,
crazy. And
I
so
need to
like,
figure out. We need to
yeah,
talk about that in another conversation, because I want to know, man. I want to get into the system that you're in, because like I'm not, I'm a great teacher, but I'm just not making it. So, but let me finish that other thought, because like the it's interesting because with a lot of this, I think coming back, the students, we were talking because the students don't feel like they're getting the tools, and it's like, it's not even the right conversation. The language, the confidence around money, we're not, and it's like, it's again, it's inaccessible. And I think like we want to start talking. I want to fucking tell people. I want to tell people the stories that I made mistakes on. It's like because we feel so stupid. It's like I can go back and tell you the first time that I absolutely was an idiot with asking someone on a date. I remember sitting outside. There was a girl. I wanted to ask her out, and so instead of asking her out, I became absolutely socially awkward and sat outside her work for about 8 hours. And then my friend asked her out to the school dance, and I was devastated. And he's like, "Well, you waited there for 8 hours, man. I gave you 8 hours." And I was like, "Why would you do that to me?" You know, and it's like I can tell you that story, but I'm terrified to tell you the financial mistakes that I've made. And it's like, and I trust you, but I'm still scared of telling you things that, how much student loan debt I have, what financial things that I've messed up with. It's like,
And
it's really,
that's what holds everybody back, right? Is it
right.
like you're insecure about where you are. Everybody's insecure about where they are financially, unless you're like really wealthy.
Yeah.
So we start off by not sharing where we're at. And in order
Yeah.
to receive like the best, most on point financial advice, is somebody needs to appreciate your specific situation and like where you want
Yeah.
to go, and like there's all sorts of different factors that feed into like the right advice for somebody financially. And so you're never really like, if you try to go online and you try to like go listen to somebody's podcast, and somebody tries saying, and I think this is a point you were making in a previous conversation, where like this is the way you need to do it. It like that right there should create a bunch of red flags, because
Yeah.
there's only one right way for each person, and that one right way is totally different for everybody, because we're all coming from different situations. For you, it's your student loans and your low level of income coming in on a monthly basis. And so like the financial advice that's best for you is totally different
Yeah.
for the financial advice for somebody who doesn't have any student debt and maybe hasn't even gone to college, right?
Right.
So like you were saying, that I didn't really appreciate what you were saying in the last conversation, but the more I've thought about it, it's just like, yeah, it's just like, in order to like really, really get comfortable with this topic, you do have to start sharing, like, and it doesn't have to be publicly in a forum, but like you want to find people that you do trust and share
100%.
where you are at, so that you can start receiving the right type of information and advice that's going to like move you to where you want to go. And so like a lot of us will just not share our stories
Right.
because we're afraid that like people, for whatever reason, are we're insecure about where we are, and so we don't share. And then we just sort of lock ourselves into that position like throughout life moving forward. And then you get to the point where maybe you're 45 and you're like, fuck man, like I'm not going to share with anybody now where I'm at,
Yeah.
because now I'm like so far from where I thought I was going to be. And the shame and embarrassment is even more profound now at 45 than it was at 30. And so like
Yeah.
it just gets harder and harder. And so man, I have like a ton of respect for you for just like almost bearing your soul in this conversation. And it's like I personally think that's what's missing from a lot of the conversations, is people just aren't comfortable sharing their stories. And look, you'll hear, everybody's going to be mouthy when they do something really well, right? So like
Yeah.
I had a
Right.
student, I had a student who kept asking me like before every class, like, what do you think of GameStop. I'm thinking about investing in GameStop. And I was like, what the fuck is this kid asking me about GameStop for? Like, who would ever invest in a video game company? This is ridiculous, right? And it kept going for months. And I was just like, finally, I was like, dude, why do you want to invest in GameStop? So he like shared the whole story with me. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, there's this whole
Really?
meme stock thing and
The
like
roaring
Reddit.
kitty, you got that guy, got everyone going, man.
So this kid, he made like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So he invested and he made tons of money. And so I was like, wow, this is like, this is a new thing. So like, I haven't told anybody this, but like, I took 20 grand and I like went on to Reddit and I was like reading all of the stupid shit that people post on Reddit. And I was like, okay, I'm going to like take a swing at investing in one of these companies. Dude, I lost my ass on that. Like, I lost 20 grand. Like, it was not a pretty sight. And the thing is that like nobody shares the horror stories.
Right.
And the thing is that like, there's 100 horror stories for any one kid who was lucky enough to invest
Right.
in GameStop. And so like, yeah, I honestly think that, just sharing your story and being as open as possible and not pretending to be the expert on
Right.
much is like such a profound way to go about digesting
When
this
I
information.
when even like, and I mean, and these people I have the utmost respect for, like Dave Ramsey and his show, and he's going on and telling people advice, and he's helping a lot of people. But I still feel like even when I listen to his podcast, I'm like, he's talking to people. Oh, you've got 6 credit cards? How? Come on, And it's just like, but what about the people who don't know that that's probably not the best? You know what I mean? It's like there's so much judgment, even from the personal finance space, about the way people are doing it. And it's like, at the end of the day, most people are just trying to survive. And you know what? Like they probably have those because they thought that they needed to have all these things to get by, And I'm certain that certainly are people that are just really doing some dumb things. But a lot of people are not doing just dumb things. Like a lot of people think, it's like I spent a lot of money in the last couple of years investing into an editor and, it took a huge chunk of my salary to keep this editor on staff because I believed in what I was doing and I still believe in it, and it's like, and I'm not going to judge that because, hey, maybe I keep Ilani's little world going until my daughter gets to college. And now we're doing some really cool stuff where I'm getting all these science experts. We interviewed this guy who was a rocket scientist for NASA, and he's going to be on my daughter's YouTube channel. And if I can help her build her brand as like this STEM kid, and then when she turns 18 and she's going to college, suddenly she's got this world of like, dude, that's probably going to be a pretty big scholarship that she could get. You know what I mean? And so I don't know, but like my point being, a lot of people don't know. And we just have to. And what my vision for this money school is to start talking about concepts in a way that is authentic, And it's like, dude, I didn't know what a freaking 401k is. I didn't know what a Roth IRA was, and I still am not so great with those. Like, and that's embarrassing to say. It's like, like it's really embarrassing to say, but I know that I'm not the only person who's sitting there thinking the same thing, And it's like you see people like, I don't want to talk about too many family members because I want to respect their privacy, but I have a sibling that did something completely different to me. And theirs was the slow corporate way. And they're making a lot better money than I am. And they have a lot more stability and they've got a better financial place. And so, I want to talk to all these people, young adults that are sitting there looking at their future and going, you've got these different paths in front of you. And if we can start talking about these things, because both of us have been professors and I love working with young people. But you know what? So often, I'm going to be working on a book that's for young adults, probably Gen Alpha, not Gen Z, but it's essentially a zombie finance guide. It's going to be kind of all these financial principles in terms of the zombie apocalypse. And why? Because if you can reframe something to be interesting, it makes it a lot easier. It's like I was talking to my daughter about wants versus needs. And I've used this example a lot on the podcast. But when I was talking about her wants versus needs, she wasn't grasping the idea. And she was like, it was just like, she wants everything. But then when I was talking to her about the idea of like, well, you only have a backpack and there's zombies outside and you can only fill that backpack with the stuff you need, or the stuff that's really going to be important for you. And so she starts listening. I put 10 things in my backpack, and she puts all these things. And then suddenly she got the two, most all of its needs. And then I gave her 2 wants. But then I was like, you know what? You're missing something. She's like, well, what is that? I was like, well, you didn't have any clothes in your backpack. So you're going to be fighting these zombies naked. It's like, oh, I can't do that. So she had to rethink her whole list. And what was interesting is because we framed it that way, she was like, oh. So the other day, she was reading this. I got this personal finance book for kids. Why? Because I like the concepts. They're simplified for idiots like me. And, and we were reading
You're
it,
like,
and she
hey, can I
got to the
read that book for a little bit?
Right? She got the chapter for wants versus needs. And she's like, Daddy, I know about this. She's like, it's like my zombie backpack. And I was like, that's it. And so I hope that, one of the visions I have for this portion of the podcast, this segment, is to look at like really helping people understand these things.
Yeah. In the context of stories, I like that. I don't know that I have a bunch of great stories that coincide with 401ks and Roth IRAs, but I do remember. So my daughter goes to Northwestern, and we went out to the campus a couple of years ago for like parent weekend. And I was like, oh, I want to go into these, like, as many classrooms and listen to as many professors as I can to just see what they're like. And I remember sitting in those classes thinking, man, I am never going to be teaching at this university. These guys are crazy, guys and gals. But I sat in one, and it was about, I think it might have even been a communications class, but it was in the context of politics and how corporate media shape uh, politics. But then it got into the concept of Trump and what really made him really good at what he was doing. And the professor was saying, like, basically, you have to do 3 things, right? In order to convince somebody of doing something, you got to do 3 things. You have to tell a story, and you have to make it simple. And then you just have to repeat it over and over and over. So storytelling, keeping it simple, and telling it over and over again. And he was like, that's how you that's how you can become a cult leader. It doesn't have to be about politics. It could be anything. And I remember sitting in that chair thinking, man, I am going to go back and I am going to brainwash so many of my fucking students about personal finance. I'm going to tell the same stories over and over and over again and make it so simple. And I'm going to do it in the context of stories. And so, like, yeah, I'm totally with you on the zombie apocalypse approach. Storytelling is where it's at. I totally agree. And being authentic.
One of the things that I want to promise to the people listening to this segment is that I promise to try to come and be as authentic as possible. And I'm sure that you will as well. And that from us, I pretty much promise that both of us are going to come with zero judgment of where you're at. So if you're wanting to, get in contact with us, share your comments onto everything and tell us your stories, because again, we're also going to be bringing people on and talking to you about your journey. And, we're really excited to start at some point in time after we get things established a little more, bring people on and say, hey, tell us your story, because we're not the only ones making bad decisions. Certainly
we can go a couple of years off of my bad decisions alone.
And I'm with you.